start by saying that the United States stands to reap significant benefits from the Turkish intervention into Jarablos and Operation Euphrates Shield in a push to displace ISIS from territory that it holds on the Syrian-Turkish border, and also over time to stage a campaign against Raqqa and seize ISIS's putative capital. So objectively speaking, Operation Euphrates Shield is one of the most important developments to date in the Syrian civil war, and particularly for the U.S. perspective for three reasons. First, Operation Euphrates Shield should be assessed for its success or failure, for its ability to be a vehicle for a local Syrian armed opposition campaign to displace and replace ISIS with the promise of sustained and direct Turkish military and humanitarian assistance to the opposition movement over the long term and on the ground inside of Syria. Perhaps some of my colleagues in the room might not want to hear this or to have it characterized this way, but Operation Euphrates Shield is Turkey's version of the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces Coalition, with a different ethnic composition. But like with the U.S. effort with this SDF, Turkey will have to manage a coalition of disparate armed opposition groups, have them seize terrain from ISIS, hold that terrain, and allow local governance structures to form, and then to have the Euphrates Shield coalition serve as a vehicle to attract, mobilize, and provide a basis to take the fight to ISIS, whether in Al-Bab, Raqqa, or territories further afield. Second, the stated objective of Turkey to construct a safe zone for refugees as a product of its direct, on-the-ground military presence in northern Syria, working by, with, and through local Syrian armed opposition partners, would dramatically expand the area of the country that is, for all intents and purposes, off limits to Assad regime and Russian military activities. Whether we like to hear it or not, the United States has created a de facto safe zone and territorial sphere of influence in northeastern Syria, working through the Syrian Democratic Forces Coalition. If, and this is a big if of course, a Turkish-built safe zone is allowed to function, there will be a long stretch of territory along the Turkish-Syrian border from Hasaka in the east to potentially Azaz in the west that will be, for all intents and purposes, a no-go zone for any type of significant Assad regime and Russian military activity. Third, and perhaps most important from the perspective of providing options for a future escalation of U.S. military involvement in Syria, the vehicle of the Operation Euphrates Shield, Turkey has the opportunity to demonstrate that it can support the development of a truly unified and politically moderate or acceptable armed opposition coalition that can not only displace ISIS, but that it can replace ISIS's governance in captured territory by supporting local councils that promote acceptable, non-ideologically extremist governance structures. This is a key point because one of the major criticisms of the feasibility of a safe zone is that because the Syrian armed opposition is mobbled up with ideological extremist actors, that a safe zone would become a safe haven for Al-Qaeda and its enablers in Syria. Now, all three of these points are interrelated, and there do remain significant challenges that prevent Operation Euphrates Shield from reaching all of these stated objectives, and they present a dilemma for Turkish military and U.S. military options in Syria. There remains the open question whether Turkey will be able to build a coalition of Syrian armed opposition groups within the Euphrates Shield that can make the United States confident enough that they can provide force protection for potentially U.S. and other coalition special forces to embed with them. This is a major demand of many of the U.S.-backed armed opposition groups west of the Euphrates. They want a more direct U.S. presence, and they want the same privileges of having embedded U.S. special forces with them that the U.S. gives to the Syrian Democratic Forces Coalition. However, the problem is that when I talk to U.S. military professionals that are responsible for the counter-ISIS campaign in Syria, they say to me that the major motivating factor for the U.S. to build up the SDF in October 2015, so about a year ago now, was that after a year of engagement with the EPG and their allied FSA militias, the U.S. military was confident enough that the SDF would provide coalition special forces with reasonable force protection to allow U.S. special forces to embed with them. The other important factor that led to the creation of the SDF was that the U.S. military wanted to cut out the middleman, so to speak, and identify, mobilize, train, equip, and advise local Syrian partners that would be able to take the fight to ISIS. There was a perception that the armed opposition groups and fighters that were presented to the U.S. military by Turkey weren't up to the task. And that, in part, led to the motivation of the creation of the SDF. Now, Turkey's ability to change this perception through Operation Euphrates Shield will depend on its ability to maintain the unity of the armed opposition groups that it has assembled through the Euphrates Shield Coalition, to expand the Euphrates Shield Coalition to allow it to be an effective vehicle to mobilize other armed opposition fighters that are currently present in Turkey now, that are from the area of Raqqa, in order to take and hold territory in and around Raqqa. The ball is in Turkey's court. One major complaint that I hear from U.S. military professionals is that the counter-ISIS campaign in Syria has had significant difficulty mobilizing fighters in the Raqqa area. Now, part of this is the product of the fact that there are legitimate Syrian Arab and other ethnic concerns over the Syrian Kurds' ambitions, and particularly in their potential intention to seize land and potentially perform acts of ethnic cleansing. However, U.S. military professionals that I talk to that are engaged in the counter-ISIS campaign in Syria say once they got past that hurdle with these Syrian Arab fighters in the area of Raqqa, Turkish pressure on these fighters to not join the SDF severely hampered their ability to recruit and mobilize this force. However, with the establishment of Operation Euphrates Shield, Turkey can leap this hurdle and build up this force in order to present a credible vehicle to take the fight to ISIS and to seize Raqqa. The Operation Euphrates Shield can succeed if it is able to combine the following three elements that I identify as being essential to building up the capacity of the Syrian armed opposition from the bottom up. First, gain legitimacy with Syrian communities at the local level. Second, be willing to provide sustained conventional military support. And third, and this is potentially the most important, exercise strategic patience to accomplish these overarching objectives. This will be a very important component of Operation Euphrates Shield, and we should all watch it very closely. A step in the right direction is that in my recent conversations with armed opposition commanders that are Syrian armed opposition commanders that are part of the Operation Euphrates Shield, they confirm that it is their understanding that Turkey not only has provided them with assurances that it will have strategic patience, but that it will empower them to unite the various armed opposition groups under a joint command to help them build security infrastructure that will support local councils that can outcompete ISIS, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, and its other enablers, and to protect the local population and to provide humanitarian assistance and the normal cross-border trade between Turkey and Syria. The ball is in Turkey's court.
Thank you, Nick.